All right, I can't even remember if I talked about this on this YouTube channel or not, because we talked about it on the radio a couple times. But this stuff about CJ and his emotions, we've got to quit fighting each other amongst Texans fans, okay? And this all goes back to Tank Dell's injury last year, where CJ Stroud was very emotional. And I'll admit, as a middle-aged dude, there was a part of me that was like, oh, it's kind of odd. I don't know. And I thought about it. I reflected upon it. Took a meditation retreat on it. Whatever you want. I prayed on it. It bubbled up again. And I'll tell you exactly how I feel about everything after this. But just to lay it all out, Brevin Jordan got injured the other day. Sean Pendergast, my co-host on Sports Radio 610, called into the afternoon show to explain what he saw, which was that Brevin Jordan was very distraught. CJ at one point, walked over and took a knee. I wasn't there. I'm not reporting this directly, but never said that he was crying or anything like that. At one point, Dalton Schultz kind of apparently consoled him a little bit. It didn't sound like that big a deal. But of course, the people started talking, and it seems like there's a stark line down the middle of people on one side that say, no, stoicism is the way, and nothing else is acceptable. And then you have other people that said, hey, empathy is good. Especially if you're a leader and your teammates know that you really, really care about them. Here's the middle path, okay? I think either school is fine. And if we look to coaches, Nick Saban, psychotic, emotionless, but very, very effective. Dick Vermeil was the opposite. Dick Vermeil used to cry all the time. Both very effective coaches. It's different strokes for different folks. But the key thing for me, and the only thing I care about when any kind of a leader or anybody else shows emotion, is that there's got to be a refractory period. And as long as somebody can be upset, but then compose themselves and get back in the moment and go lead when you need to lead, I'm not all that worried about it. I do think there's a little bit of a hardening that goes on when you see what life is like in the NFL. And I'm very hesitant to even describe it this way, because it almost sounds like you're describing actual real military stuff, which it obviously is not, including the compensation. But there is in pro football, the season's so long, the guys are full-grown men. There's injuries, and there's more devastating injuries than you're accustomed to seeing, even at big-time colleges. And you kind of figure it out over time that, okay, this happens, and then you move on. And DeMeco the other day, when I was talking to him, for those of you who watched the interview, he talked about how his first couple years, it was just such a shock to him that, guys get cut all the time, and it kind of affected him emotionally. So I think we're arguing about a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be argued about. And I think as long as CJ if he has emotion when guys get injured, that's great, because I think he genuinely does care about these guys. But everybody's got to be able to have that bounce back, and the leaders especially have to be able to do it more quickly than others. And he's still a young quarterback. So that's all I have to say about that. And you'll never drag me into any kind of Twitter arguments about it. Okay? I'm not going to judge you as tough or soft or anywhere in between based on how you feel about it, other than that everybody is individual. When it comes to Brevin Jordan himself, I think Jakob Johnson, the fullback / tight end, is probably the most likely replacement, which they were planning on using him a lot, but he can line up at fullback, he can line up at tight end. Irv Smith obviously is there, as well as the draft pick. But Brevin has never been a steady week in, week out, huge factor, but he shows up in really opportune moments, and that's what you lose from a football standpoint. I feel awful for the kid, because he came back. He was so excited to be out there playing football this year, and I just genuinely appreciated being on the practice field. So hopefully he just has a successful recovery from this one. This is DeMeco on Jakob Johnson. The reason it's pronounced Jakob is because he's a German national, all right? I'm not trying to be all fancy or anything. And of all the Western Europeans, I would say Germany is probably the least fancy of the Western German. But then you go over to Eastern Europe, and it's just I don't want to fight anybody from Eastern Europe.
Hey, Jakob has done a good job. He has some familiarity with Kaylee and Pop being in New England. Physical player when it comes to the run game. So he's added some versatility to our offense when can get into more two-back sets, also being in the wing sets as tight end.
Yeah, and the versatility is it. That's the which I know is Landry made a funny kind of shtick out of it back in the day with Bill O'Brien. Landry started calling it the V word because it seemed like O'Brien loved guys to be versatile, but the key to versatility is that you need to be good in all of the separate roles. Just because you can do a bunch of stuff doesn't mean that you're good at a bunch of stuff. So that's the key distinction there, is that you want guys who can be good at all these things. I think for so long now, people have just kept fullbacks off their roster and figured, well, we'll just use tight ends as the fullback, which, as a guy that played back in the era of fullbacks being a staple in the NFL, is deeply insulting to me. Why would it be insulting to me? Because I got concussed by those brick-faced sons of bitches. Those guys, those Lorenzo Neals of the world and everything, my God. It's painful to play against those guys. So I like having a guy that Jakob is more of a pure fullback who can play tight end than a tight end who can play fullback, and I like that. When it comes to the game the other day, I want to talk about Davis. Let's just do Davis Mills just for a little bit. And I'm going to have DeMeco talking about Davis Mills and what a great drive he had. And I know a lot of you are going to be saying something about that drive and a bad play that Davis Mills may have had during DeMeco's time. Don't worry, I'll address it. Here's DeMeco on Davis Mills.
From Davis, I saw a guy in complete control, and that's what you have to have at that quarterback position. I mean, talking about controlling the huddle, controlling the line of scrimmage, the communication was flawless, and that was indicative of the type of drive that we had. Like, there were no miscues. Davis was able to work his way methodically down the field, making great decisions with the football, getting us in the right run reads, just all across the board. Couldn't be more pleased with where Davis is, and he's just continued to grow. Every single year he's grown, and he's been a very valuable asset to us having him.
Yeah, I think we've all settled into where Davis Mills is, at least right now. I think at some point there could be a team that looks at him as a potential bridge quarterback or a guy that can compete for a starting role, and a lot of that's just going to depend on if and when he gets chances to play in the regular season. But he's been in a scheme similar to this before, at least. Some of the things that Nick Caley wants the quarterbacks to do in this scheme, Davis had said himself he's already seen with Bill O'Brien. Was it Davis or was it somebody else? It was Titus Howard. Anyway, there's some concepts that are familiar, and Davis has been through multiple different offensive coordinators now. Those are your most valuable backup quarterbacks, I've always felt, is the guys that have been in multiple systems. They just tend to have a deeper understanding of the NFL at large than even a lot of coaches. Think about it, a lot of coaches spend their whole life pretty much working in one coaching tree, and they put their own little tweaks and spins on it. But a lot of backup quarterbacks they've taken a sampling all of it. That's why I like Chase Daniel and JT O'Sullivan and those guys. You can bag on them all that you want and say, like, what do you know? You were never a starter. Right? Yeah, I kind of like him because he wasn't a starter. And those guys actually make it with their wits to a certain degree, because they obviously don't have the same physical skills of a Brett Favre or anybody. But as far as the one play that you're probably bringing up, hey, what about he overthrew Cade Stover in the end zone? He did. I remember that. He made up for it with the Braxton Berrios touchdown. I was on the Believe in Texans podcast with Cecil and I. Cecil Shorts and I do that a couple times a week. And I had him explain that play to me because, I had thought that Cade was either tried to settle in a pocket in the zone there, or may have been trying to bend that into a post or something. I'll play what Cecil said about that play.
Stover and Brevin Jordan on your left side. And what Brevin Jordan had was a simple out and up, and his landmark was probably in between.
Hold up, let me get my face out of here.
About 5 yards from the sideline. The landmark that Stover had, I don't think he was on his correct landmark.
Okay.
So where Davis threw the ball, he threw it more outside. So Stover ended up like on the inside part of the numbers. He should have been either on the numbers or maybe even at the bottom part of the number. And that way he could have ran and jumped and caught the ball. That he threw where he wanted to be, away from the safety, right? Because you were right. He looked like he almost wanted to settle down or even thought about going inside. Like, no, keep getting away from the safety. And then Davis would have put it and it would have been a touchdown.
I love Cecil. He'll be at the game on Saturday doing his normal, hot dog bun races and everything. He's awesome at that. I'm going to do a podcast just about his game day duties. So, Davis, so far so good. It's the preseason, et cetera, et cetera. I take the good performances with a grain of salt. I take the bad performances really seriously because for all of the reasons you have to take the good performances with a grain of salt, you're facing backups, you're going against vanilla defenses, et cetera, all that. Teams aren't really game planning against each other hardcore. That's why if a guy has a bad performance, it's more about him just getting physically beat. So that's where my concern for Blake Fisher comes in. If we talk about the offensive line in general, here is DeMeco on the offensive line. Let's see, I don't think I put that one in there. Let's just do DeMeco talking about Ursary.
Our O-line, they've been working well together. Last week, seeing them, we shuffled some guys around. They've worked well. Tay, put him at left tackle. We saw the reps that he had in the game. Thought he did a really nice job. The game isn't too big for Tay, and that's what stands out to me for the rookie. Like, he stepped right in. Again, there's always reps to improve upon, but where he started, that's a really strong start for a rookie. And just want to see, okay, now this week when he gets a few more reps, let's see, how he plays, against the Panthers, how he plays against their ends. They have good ends, so we'll see how he does this week.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch him. I think that the question about who are the starting five going to be, and if I had to handicap it, I think right now, because there's not a lot to feel great about with Blake Fisher. They signed a kind of a journeyman guy today who I think is going to come in and give reps and be a body while Cam Robinson is injured, but I'm not holding my breath that any of the recent offensive line acquisitions are going to be potential starters or backups right off the bat. I think that it's really going to probably all come down to Ed Ingram at right guard, or whether they feel comfortable with Ed Ingram. If they feel good about Ed Ingram, then I think you see Titus Howard at right tackle, and I think you see Ursary at left tackle. If they're kind of iffy on it, and if Cam Robinson, who he hadn't been looking great in the first couple weeks of camp, but I'm always with veteran offensive tackles, sometimes those guys come along slowly. Remember George Fant? George Fant looks atrocious in camp a couple years ago. I thought it was going to be a disaster if he had to play meaningful reps. And then he ended up being pretty solid and getting a better contract elsewhere after that. So with older offensive tackles, I try to reserve my judgment and go more almost like a veteran pitcher during training camp or during spring training. Yeah, they are who they are, and their numbers might not look good during spring training. If the Texans feel between his injury and his performance in camp that it's more than that, then I don't have any issues at all with Ursary starting off right off the bat. But I'm 50-50 right now on that. I feel comfortable that with an extra few weeks of practice that Ursary's going to be an acceptable. I won't say it's okay for him to play as a rookie. I'll say he'll be an acceptable level offensive tackle compared to a lot of other guys in the league. I feel that confident in him. I think his upside is much better than just acceptable offensive tackle, but I'm feeling good about it so far. This is one of the little things that maybe matters to some people and to others not at all, but I always find it interesting about whether an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator wants to coach from the sideline or up in the booth. Kaylee was in the booth the other night. Here's DeMeco on that.
No, for Kaylee, he wanted to call it up top. I think as a coordinator, you have to get your feel as a first-time caller. You get a good feel for doing it up top and also doing it on the field. So for him, I think the first one he was up. Now this week we'll flip it. He'll be down this week. So that's what we use preseason for coaches as well, right? To go through the mechanics of how we operate on the sideline. But the communication was really, really great from the offensive and defensive perspective.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys, let me know in the comments if you have any opinion one way or the other on that. I personally, I always feel like if I'm not a head coach, I'd want to be in the booth because you just have such a better vantage point. But I'm also not a very good delegator. And when I do have to delegate, I probably micromanage a little bit, which means that I've got trust issues. So if you're going to be a coordinator on the sideline, you got to really trust the guys up in the booth. So hypothetical Seth, the coordinator, needs to get better about just screening and hiring the right people. And then B, giving them responsibility, allowing them to be my eyes in the booth. But beyond that, there's just something about seeing it with your own eyeballs, seeing if the offensive line is getting movement, seeing exactly how everybody's lining up on the field. But I can't have a hard opinion on it. Daniel had asked about Eli Cox. I tried to watch Eli Cox somewhat closely in practice in West Virginia. And, they stayed pretty strict 1s, 2s, 3s. So it's not like Eli Cox was going against a bunch of studs. But I think he has potential. He's a very good athlete by center standards. He's undersized in some ways. And there were times, like, he had good reps, bad reps, like any rookie typically does. But I thought that, and he's also going against, Tommy Togiai and those guys had some really nice plays against him. But I saw good plays too, and I can see he plays with leverage. He's got good hips, so I'm intrigued by him. I'll be surprised if they keep him on the regular season roster. I'm expecting him to be practice squad. But I didn't watch him and think like, oh God, what's this guy even doing on a football field? So I think there's something there. As far as the emotional stuff, because I see some of you guys saying, what are you talking about with people talking about CJ's emotion? This may have largely been a sports radio thing because the afternoon show, because Clinton and Ron were pretty critical of just quarterbacks showing emotion or being upset or whatever it might be. I don't want to take anything they said out of context, and a lot of people disagreed with them. And to me, it felt like it blew up way more than it needed to. Largely, if you're a smart person that largely stays off of social media for more than a few minutes at a time, or if you're not, listening to certain pockets of sports radio, it really wasn't a big deal. It hurts me to see people argue about like relatively silly things, I think, at some point. All right. I like Kaylee from the booth. Let him focus more on scheme, and Gerard Johnson can be the on-field coach that CJ is more comfortable with. Plus, DeMeco is more than capable of kicking butts if needed. Yes. Excellent point. There's some other good comments here that I can't get to because I got to try to catch up on a Sherlock Holmes before the Astros game begins. It's a lot of responsibilities this life brings.